Data,
My name is Kalyan Reddy.
and we're here again with another episode of Google Apps Unscripted. This is our once a month show where we talk about Google Apps Script in kind of a free-form way. So we do a little bit of news, events, some updates, and then basically are here to answer your questions. If you have questions about Google Apps Script, there's a couple ways you can get in touch with us and join into the show today. The first is we have a live Hangout going. There's a link in the page for this event, the Plus page, as well as a page on developers.google.com. So you can join the Hangout if you have a camera and mic, ask us a question live. If you don't have that equipment or you're a little shy, you can, of course, click on the link to the Google Moderator, which is a place where you can post questions, and we'll be getting to those later in the show. So yeah, let's kick things off. It's been a couple weeks since we had our last episode, and there's been some news since then. So one of the big things that we've done in AppScript in the past couple weeks is launch data validation support. So Kalyan, what is data validation?
So data validation is actually one of our top feature requests. It's been there for a while. Here, I'll go to our blog post here. And data validation is actually a spreadsheets feature where you can apply validation rules to certain cells and say that when someone enters a value, you either flag it with a little red triangle at the end, saying this is not in a particular range, or it's not in the list of values that you want, or you can just not allow certain values that aren't what you expect.
Yeah, I feel like it's really handy when you have a spreadsheet that many people are editing, and you want to make sure that the content that they're putting into the spreadsheet is valid. It's not like a bad value or something that's going to mess up. You want to limit their choices down to either a number in a certain range or something in a list, right? So,
or for example, if you're just collecting like what cities to go on a road trip, you can put the cities in the U.S. in the list or something.
Yeah, limit the data to the valid data instead of anything. And so, AppScript is really being used, I think, primarily historically, and still probably the most today in Google Spreadsheets. It's a really great tool for adding extra functionality to a Google spreadsheet. And so although we've had the ability to change values, set background colors, it wasn't until this past month that we added the ability to programmatically create, edit, remove this kind of data validation logic in a spreadsheet.
Yeah, why don't we take a look at the blog post,
Yeah.
and then maybe we can run through the quick example in there. If you want to check this out yourself, it's in our developer blog, googleappsdeveloper.blogspot.com. Here it is. Let's see. Do you want to run through this example here, Eric?
Yeah, so we can kind of show you a little bit what we're doing. So we have two short examples here. One is showing you how you can just very quickly add data validation to a cell that didn't have it before, or rather to overwrite the data validation regardless what's there. And so this one is very simple, where it's doing one of the most popular forms of data validation, limit the options in this cell to only the values in this range. So we're taking the range B1, B10 that has our values we want to use, and then we're grabbing the range A1, which is where we want to apply this new data validation. And then we have a small builder pattern that you can see there that allows you to create these data validations. So you say spreadsheet app, new data validation, and then this data validation should require a value in the range, and then there's the range there, B1 to B10. And then .build, and then now we have a new data validation object.
And so just a background on the builder pattern real quick. Every method that you call here, it returns the data validation object, so you can chain these successive calls and say require values in this range, do it for this, etc.
Yeah, if you're new to AppScript, this chaining looks a little strange sometimes, but essentially every method you apply returns the original object back to you again.
Right.
And that allows you to kind of like keep, well, I guess the modified object back to you again, so you can
Right.
keep operating on it.
And when you call build at the end, it changes from the builder object to the actual final built object that you
Yeah.
can pass to your other functions.
And so then you take that built data validation and just call set data validation, passing it in, and now that cell will have the data validation applied. Now, it's great to add one-time data validations, but really the power of scripting is to do something complex that you wouldn't want to do yourself by hand, right? By hand, I could easily add that data validation. And so this second example here, it shows you something where really having the ability to script comes in handy. So the situation here is, let's say you had a spreadsheet where all your data validations were based upon, I want to limit the person to only picking a date in this current calendar year, right? And so you have all these cells where the data validation on these cells is set to only a date within 2013. Well, now all of a sudden the year's over, 2014 is here. I want to make a copy of that spreadsheet. I want to keep, I want to allow people to now focus on the year 2014. Well, to go through and find all the 2013s and swap them with 2014s it'd be a nightmare. So what we're doing here is automatically crawling over all the sheets, all the ranges within the current sheet, but you could easily extend this to be all sheets in the spreadsheet, finding all of the ranges that have data validation. And if they were previously set up to be with this kind of data validation between January 1st, 2013 and December 31st, 2013, to swap it out to be that equivalent date in 2014. Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a more involved example, but basically this is how you get all the data validation rules within the particular range, and you get the range up here when you do the when you get the active sheet, and you get the range for all of it.
Yeah. So yeah, that it's really nice that we kind of treat data validation objects the same way we treated values or background colors, where you can take an entire range, gather up all the data validation settings for that entire range, make modifications, and then save it all back again. Mm-hmm. So that's what you can see at the very bottom here, is that we built up this array of our new data validations, and then at the end, one call set data validations takes all of the settings we've built up and saves them to the spreadsheet in one go. Doing it like this, instead of saving cell by cell by cell, much faster.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah. All right.
And this is like a general paradigm for spreadsheets. You don't ever want to do, I'm going to get this value, then the cell next to it, then the cell next to it, and then keep changing it and writing it back, because that actually creates a ton of calls to the spreadsheet, which make your script run over the maximum execution time. Much better ways to get all of the values as a batch, process them within your script, and then write them all.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen dramatic increases in speed when you just change that one little paradigm, so definitely worth doing from the start. All right, great. So that's data validation. We hope people enjoy it. It was one of our most popular feature requests on the issue tracker. If you're not aware, we do maintain an issue tracker that's linked off of our documentation, where you can file feature requests or bugs. And one of the feature requests we had for a long time was add this feature. And so we got around to it, and we hope everybody's enjoying it and happy.
And this is a good example of how you can let us know what the priority of certain features is. Data validation, for example, had a ton of people that were starring the issue on the issue tracker. And so that was a signal to us, basically, that this is important to you, and we tried our hardest to get it out there.
Yeah, the team really relies on people starring issues as a way to get a sense of their relative importance. So if there's an issue that you really want to see fixed, either a bug or implemented if it's something new, star it. You'll get updates on that whenever we comment, and as well, you'll also indicate to us that this is something you really care about. All right, great. So going from things that we have added, I want to talk a little bit now on the other side of things that are going away. So we're doing a little bit of cleaning up of house, and a while back we posted how some of our features are going to be sunset, and it's going to coming up next month. And so we want to make sure people, if you missed that original announcement, are aware. So the two things that we're sunsetting, I think it's on the 16th, is GUI Builder, as well as 4 UI app components. So UI app is one of the two ways right now you can build user interfaces in AppScript. It's one where you use, you kind of like lay out some different components programmatically, kind of like add a button here, add a text box there. And there are some components that just never quite worked right. And we realized that there's now, with the HTML service, other better ways to accomplish the same goal. So those 4 at the top there, hyperlink, inline hyperlink, layout panel, and rich text area, those are going to be shut down on September 16th.
And by the way, the page that you're looking at here is our sunset schedule page that you can get in the AppScript page by going to support and then sunset schedule.
Yeah. So because those never really worked correctly to begin with, we hope that this will have a very low impact on people. But if it is in your code, you may start getting an error if you're still creating one. So you want to go through some of your code that you know could have this and maybe clean it up. And then GUI Builder is a drag and drop tool for building UI app interfaces. So UI app you can use in code to add all of these components, and GUI Builder was a way that without code you could drag a button here and drag a text box there. We found that it really wasn't getting the use that we were hoping it was going to get, and for other technical reasons we've decided to turn it off. So we've had the word deprecated in the menu item for the GUI Builder for a little while now, but come September 16th, we're actually going to shut down the GUI Builder as well. Now what that means is that if you have built a GUI in the past using GUI Builder, you won't be able to edit it, and you won't be able to create any new ones. But at least for the time being, if you have built a GUI Builder and you're using it in the serving of your application, we'll continue to serve up that old GUI Builder interface. So if you already built with GUI Builder, I think now's a good time to start thinking about how you want to migrate off of that. And I think you want to look into Using HTML service would be our best recommendation, but you can also just use regular UI app. And now's a good time to get off of that because once we take away the GUI builder interface, you're not going to be able to make any more changes to that UI.
Yep.
All right. I think now we're ready to talk about release notes, right?
Do you want to talk about AdSense?
Right, AdSense. Good catch. So this is not exactly an AppScript specific thing, but in AppScript we have a section of our documentation called Advanced Services. These are a way that you can use regular Google APIs, the ones that are available to the whole world, and kind of very easily make requests to them in AppScript. And so what we're doing here is just very, very much is taking the API everybody else uses and giving it to you. What that means is that when those APIs decide to change, get rid of versions, add new versions, you have to be a little bit aware. And so for instance, the AdSense API, which we've had available now for a while, they have shut down, I believe, version 1 and version 2, and you can only use version 3. I think it might be 1.1 and 1.2, and you can use 1.3. But regardless, they have already done that. That happened in this week, earlier in August. But if you ran into that, if you realize that you got caught up in that, it is important that if you use one of these advanced services to know that you're using another Google Products API, and they may have decisions about when they do sunsets, how long they support a version for, and you just kind of need to stay on top of that a little bit.
And so you can easily see what these services are in our developer page under the reference section. It's under these Advanced Google Services tab. So these are the ones that are kind of packaged external APIs that we just allow easier access to.
Yeah, and so if you went to the AdSense API homepage, I think they'd have some messages there about these versions going away. And so we just honored that same sunset schedule that they had in AppScript.
Yep. All right, let's talk about release notes.
All right.
So we've had a couple of releases since our last unscripted at the end of July. So here, let's start with the August 5th one. We added the message get plain body to the Gmail message class, and what this basically does is returns the content of the message. If you don't care about any of the HTML formatting, you just want to get, what is the text here so I can operate on it, then you can easily do this without writing your own regex to strip out HTML, which is a nightmare, and you should not do it.
Yeah, that really can be. There's a couple times when I needed to parse an email message, and I really just wanted the bare minimum text.
Yeah.
I really didn't care about the markup they had and tables, so that was really nice to add.
Yeah, it's kind of like a handy utility method where it's like, just give me the text.
Yeah.
I don't want to
give it to me straight.
Let's see. There's a couple of deprecations. So as we've announced before, we've added the Drive App service, which is a replacement to the DocsList service. And what we're showing here is that some of the methods that used to be in DocsList we deprecated because there are equivalents with Drive App as well. So, for example, find, get all files, get all folders. These are methods that take a start value and then a maximum number of results to return value. We're deprecating those in favor of the methods in Drive App or the paging methods within DocsList, which actually return you a token, which you can use for, it's called continuation, which is basically, I've processed everything up till this token. I'm going to give you this token, give me some more results starting at this token.
Yeah. So the key here is that, although Drive App is the future, you can still continue to use DocsList right now. It has not been deprecated as of yet. But we had these certain methods that there's just different back-end reasons were not very efficient, and there's better paging methods out there in DocsList, like the get something for paging method. So we encourage you to, if you're using DocsList, try using Drive, but if you need to use DocsList, use these paging methods instead for getting a large numbers of results. If you just need to get, I just need to get the first 10 files, you'll be fine. But a lot of times people want all the files, and all the files can be a lot of files. Some Drive people power users out there, they have quite a number of files in their Drive.
Right. Okay, let's see. A couple of issues were fixed. One is the feature request we talked about, the data validation rules. If we talked in a previous episode about the Google Drive SDK that allows you to download your AppScript source files onto your computer so that you can upload them to a source control repository or write a plugin. Like we mentioned before, someone wrote a plugin for the Sublime text editor that allows them to edit AppScript files and re-upload them. There was a bug in it where HTML files were being uploaded under the server JS type, which is usually for code files, and that has since been resolved. So now they should be uploaded as HTML.
Cool.
See, special characters don't need to be escaped twice. So if you did have a script where you were double escaping special characters, you no longer need to do that. And when and this is a key thing. So if you disable drive app in the domain administration panel, this only applies when you're using drive app within a domain, when your script is in a domain account. If your administrator has disabled drive apps, then drive app now throws an appropriate error message. So it's not going to function, but before it used to throw a generic server error, and now it clearly says you don't have permission to do this, you're not allowed to do this.
Yeah.
And then you can contact your administrator to find out why, because app scripts are awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of times in AppScript where we'll give you an error message, and sometimes you're like, what?
Yeah.
What is that? I don't know what to do with this. So if that has happened, let us know. And I think this is a case where someone reported it. Let us know, and we can go in there and come up with a more appropriate error message that allows you to better determine what went wrong, maybe how you can work around it, or fix your code to not run into that error.
Yep. And we added a convenience method, spreadsheet.delete sheet, where you can specify the actual sheet. So before, what we had was you can delete the active sheet. So you had to make the sheet an active sheet, and then you call delete sheet, and they would get rid of it. But this is, if you don't want to switch what the active sheet is, you can just provide it a name.
That's great.
Let's see. And the last release on August 19th, we added more convenience methods to the Drive app service. One is a make copy where you can provide the destination. The old make copy method, you call it on the file itself, and it would make the copy within the same directory of where the original was, or the root, I think. But this one, in any case, allows you to specify a folder where the copy should go.
Yeah, I think it was in the same directory as the file you're copying, and the problem there was that if someone shared with you a folder in read-only mode, if you tried to make a copy of that file, which you should be able to do, it would make that copy right in the folder you only had read-only access to, and so it would fail.
Right.
So now you can make a copy of a file in a read-only folder and make it into a folder that you do have write access into. So it's a little workaround for that.
And the last thing here, well, there was a performance issue that affected certain scripts that no longer occurs. Kind of cryptic, but most people weren't affected by this. And if you were, we apologize for that, and we've since applied a fix that should relieve that.
Yeah. Now, AppScript isn't necessarily ultra fast in all scenarios, but if you do see something where something that used to only take a second or two is now taking 10, 20, 30, if you actually have, and you can point to us, here's the code that's running really slow, do let us know, because we do want to make sure that if there's any sort of performance change that's coming about, that we kind of look into that.
Right. And just the fact that everything runs on the cloud, you can't guarantee exactly the same performance, every single iteration of every loop, but you can, using the execution transcript, which is a feature that we recently added, you can get timings for this, and then you can use your best judgment. If something used to take 5 seconds total and now it's taking 5 minutes, then there's clearly something wrong there. So that's something worth discussing. Whereas if it was taking 5 seconds and now it's taking 7 seconds, that could be like a transient thing, or it could just be the fact that it's running on a lot of different servers in the back end.
There's so many different reasons that those things can change.
Exactly.
But if there's patterns, if we see hey, all the time or 9 times out of 10, this thing is running way slow, that's important for us to know.
All right.
All right.
That's it for release notes. You want to jump to the Hangout?
Yeah, I think our producer says we have a few people in the Hangout. And I also saw here, Luca, you mentioned that you can't see the screen we're sharing on the Hangout. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, that is a limitation but you get to be here live, so that's the plus side.
All right, thanks, guys.
Do you have any questions for us today?
Well, actually, I posted some on the moderator. Actually.
Okay, great.
But yeah, specifically, actually, there's one I haven't posted, but I uploaded, which I was kind of interested in. The idea is that so you can kind of publish versions, but you cannot revert your code to a specific version. So I was wondering if maybe that's in the pipeline of things to implement.
Yeah, people have been asking for that since we introduced versions. I think when we put out versions, it was about the time that we were launching, I think, libraries and web apps. And I think the main goal there was that when you're giving your code to someone else, you want to make sure there's stability. So you can keep developing, but that someone who's utilizing it either as a web app or in a library gets the concrete fixed version that worked. The natural extension of that, though, is to say, hey, what about reverting my code, right? If I make a version that works and then I totally mess it up in my development process, I want to go back to the version that worked myself. And that's not there today, and we have talked about that. There is in the script editor a way for you to see your revision history. However, that isn't really version aware. It's kind of every time you, I think, hit save, you'll get another entry in there, and we only save so many. So it's not quite the same as having reverting to versions.
It is kind of noisy and not fully useful in that sense, but unfortunately this isn't completely packaged. But the way to do this now, the workaround would be to use the Drive SDK, and you can snapshot your files at any point, and then you could use your own version control in that way. And unfortunately this isn't like a packaged solution. But
one of the things we're trying to, I think we always try to work out in AppScript is how much do we want to create a tool and how much do we want to allow you to use a tool that you may already be using. So a lot of people love using GitHub, for instance, to manage their code and version it. So we're trying to figure out how much should we build our own thing and how much should we utilize kind of the developer tools that are already out there. So I think we'll continue to look into it specifically in the versioning case, and we'll see how things turn out there.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions on the Hangout? All right, let's jump to the moderator here.
Yeah, we'll leave the mics running, so if you guys have questions in between, feel free to ask away.
Got some great questions here. Let's see. So Eric, for a file in Google Drive, get editors or get viewers is not available in Drive app since it's only in docs list. Is this supported in the future in Drive app class, or do we still need to use docs list?
That's a very good question. So the reason it's not in Drive app today is because the Drive product, I think Google in general, has kind of shifted away from making your email address a piece of public information. So for instance, if you're in a doc and someone joins and starts editing, or if you look in the sharing dialog inside Google Drive, you'll actually see someone's name, their face, but you won't actually see their email address. And so I think what we're trying to do here is in Drive app, reflect that same paradigm where someone's email address won't be necessarily available to you just because you have access to their document. So we know this is a problem for people who are building apps that do things like making sure that someone has access or doesn't have access, monitoring who has access. So we are working on adding some more features to Drive app that allows you to get closer to the same information you have in docs list. But it may be that we come up with a different solution for Drive app than there was in docs list, rather than just returning people's email addresses. So stay tuned for that, and hopefully we'll have more news for you in the future. I think long term though, docs list is not there to be kind of like in addition to Drive app. Docs list is an older technology, and I think we're encouraging people to move to Drive app when possible. And if there are things like this that prevent you from moving to Drive app, thank you so much for bringing them up, because we do want to make sure that you have the ability to move your functionality off docs list. I think I heard someone new join the Hangout. Do you have a question?
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay,
I can't
nice.
see you.
I'm Luciano from Brazil. I want to ask if is there any plan to add download as HTML that zipped folder into AppScript? Currently, we can only download it as a PDF, and since we can through the interface download it as a HTML zipped folder, it would be very nice to be able to do it from the AppScript.
Are you referring to a Google Docs file?
Yes, a Google Docs file, a native document in Drive.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, there is that ability. There are actually, if you go to Google Docs or even Google Sheets, there are a lot more options under the download menu bar than there are inside of AppScript today. Right? I think we just did, as you mentioned, PDFs today inside AppScript. We are aware that people kind of really want to have access to more file types, whether it be exporting to an OpenOffice file type or to, like you mentioned, HTML. We want to make more of those available in AppScript. It's been something we've talked about for a while, and I'll bring it back up with the team again and make sure that they're aware that people are still asking for this.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Anyone else on the Hangout? All right, let's continue with these questions. This save versions, we already answered this question just now from Santi. It'd be great if we could develop a full-blown website using AppScript, but currently cannot map a script to a domain. Is there a way I can do it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty straight.
Yes, good question. Unfortunately, it's not possible today. So, one of the things we wanted to do with the AppScript web apps was make it very easy to deploy, right? It's actually just one small dialogue. You say what version, you say the access, you hit deploy, you're done, right? You compare that to launching a website on almost any other platform, and it's many, many steps quicker.
Yeah.
I think one of the downsides of that is that it's also less configurable, right? So I think if you think about AppScript web apps, sometimes it would be nice to launch something full-blown, but I think we're not trying to solve that problem. There's a lot of great products at Google and outside Google that allow you to build websites and web apps. And I think to actually to do that right requires some tools and some features that just aren't in AppScript today. And so I think when you think about AppScript web apps, it's probably best to think about small tools, things to use within an organization, utilities, something that's kind of small in scope. And for those, we hope that running them off script.google.com would be enough. But do let us know, I guess, if that won't work for those kind of use cases. But we're definitely trying to encourage people to think of web apps in AppScript as meant for solving smaller problems, not launching a business or something of that nature.
And if you do want to make a full-blown website, that's one of the indications that you should move on to something like App Engine, which lets you have more control over the configuration and deployment aspect.
Yeah, I mean, some people, what they do is they'll prototype something in AppScript because, like I mentioned, you can get it running really quickly. We have all these integrations into Google services, so you can make a kind of like prototype version of an app you want to build really quickly, show it around to people, get feedback, and then when you're time to really make the final production version, then maybe look into another platform like App Engine. I'd say that'd probably be our answer for now.
Okay. Next question here is, can I pull a list of values from a spreadsheet into my form so that each time the form is opened, it will update with the most current list of values? Yes.
And the answer is yes. So not only can you do this yourself with the Form app, which is another integration into Google Forms that we launched for I/O this year, and I gave a presentation on. If you want to see it, I think it's a really good I/O presentation. I'm a little biased. But not only can you build it yourself, and actually a Form app is very easy to use, but one of the kind of top contributors and most popular scripters out there for AppScript, Andrew Stillman, who works in the education space, he built a script, I believe it's called Form Ranger, that does exactly this. Allows you to take a range within your spreadsheet and tie it into a form field so that whenever the range changes, the form gets updated. So yeah, certainly possible, and you may not even have to write any code. Although, if you would like to write code, it wouldn't be that hard, and I think you'd actually learn a lot too. All right.
All right. Any questions on the Hangout? Feel free to jump in. We'll leave your mics up, and we can hear you there. Okay. You want to continue with the moderator here?
Yeah.
All right. AppScript deployed as a web app to run in the context of the user who runs it, targeted for more than 10,000 users.
Whoa.
Is there a limit on the number of concurrent hits for web app or any other limit not listed in the AppScript dashboard that should be a potential concern?
Yeah, so we have got this question before, which is what are the limits of how much, is there bandwidth limits on upload or download from a web app or concurrent requests to a web app? We don't have anything published, but I do want to echo back to what I had said to the previous question there, that we really don't think that AppScript is the right tool if you're going to have, 10K concurrent users, I guess it's 10K users in general, but when you're really looking at something that needs to scale to a lot of people, really like a production level web application, we think that AppScript may not be the best choice. If you see what's there, we don't really have the information about those kind of details right now, although we can look into getting it. But we also don't have some of the tooling around monitoring that you'd want to see if you were building a large scale web application. So
logging, etc.
Yeah. So I would recommend against launching that on AppScript, but you're certainly welcome to try. We have had someone in the past who launched a very popular web app for their organization that used ScriptDB, and they did run into some quotas. So maybe there's not going to be a limit on the web app serving side, but the pieces of AppScript you're using, whether it be Gmail app for sending emails, or the spreadsheet app for reading spreadsheets, or ScriptDB for storing data, those all have their own individual quotas that are more targeted at a an individual use case kind of level, the quotas, and not really kind of geared up for a full scale large application.
And the poster mentioned in the question that it's deployed to run in the context of the user, which definitely helps in that regard.
It helps with the quotas a little bit and running in the context of the user, but something like ScriptDB, for instance, has limits that are tied to the developer. So you do want to be careful there.
Yep. All right, next question. Any news on access to custom properties on Google Docs from AppScript?
Yes.
Are there workarounds in the meantime?
So I think this is that the Google Drive SDK, they allow you to read and write small properties to the document itself. In AppScript, you can set properties on your script or on the user, but not on the document. So although that exists in the Drive SDK, it hasn't yet made it into Drive app. We're still talking about whether that makes sense. And I think it should be possible to call the Drive SDK from AppScript using URL fetch, but you'll have to do a lot of the plumbing yourself when it comes to authorization and building the requests. So it could be a good deal of work there. I do know that some of our top contributors have built wrapper libraries that allow you to call into services and features that we don't support. So you may want to investigate if they've already solved this problem or if they'd be willing to add it in.
And a great place to look that up is in the AppScript community.
Yeah.
On Plus.
On Google Plus. We have a very active community there.
All right, final
Just about
question.
out of time, yeah, let's wrap it up.
All right, final question is, since AppScript web apps are served from a non-Google domain, Google user content, why can't there be less restrictions? Evaluating HTML strips many things and cannot freely set HTTP headers.
Yeah, so I think Luca's here with us. I looked into this earlier today, and I'm pretty sure it's not served off Google user content. Now, if you're using the HTML service, it's served off of script.google.com. If you're using the content service, it does do a redirect from script.google.com to Google user content. But when you're serving HTML service, HTML, it is served off script.google.com. And that allows you to do some things like easily integrate other Google services because you're already passed your Google information, your login information to the web page. Because of that, we do need to be restrictive. We don't want someone's JavaScript code messing with your session or doing things on your behalf other than what they've been authorized to do.
Okay. I guess the final thing is, because my use case was that I needed to use specific headers, like I had to return different content types. Like there's one called application/RDF XML, something like that, and I couldn't do that. So I was just wondering if it's a little more flexible on that. But I guess it's like the other things that it's not meant for to be used in that way, I guess.
Gotcha. Well, so the content service does allow you to serve arbitrary file types. However, well, not arbitrary, serve various file types, but ones that we limit to a certain enum. So if there is something that's missing in there that you think you'd like to see, you can file a feature request for that, and it is not too much work for us to add that in.
All right.
Great. All right, well, I think that does it for today's episode of Google Apps Unscripted. If you have any questions in the meantime before our next episode, which is probably going to be a month from now, feel free to reach us on Stack Overflow or to talk to us on Google+. And yeah, stay tuned to the blog for more announcements. Our release notes are updated weekly by our very own Kalyan. So yeah, plenty of ways you can stay in touch outside of the show. But if not, we'll see you again next month.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
See you guys.